It was a day like any other at the upscale boutique in the heart of Crestview. Employees moved swiftly between racks of exclusive designer wear, their polished appearances masking an invisible yet insidious truth. The store, with its gleaming glass doors and perfectly arranged displays, exuded luxury and sophistication. Customers arrived in sleek cars, stepping inside to the soft hum of ambient music, greeted by crisp scents of leather and expensive fragrances. Beneath this veneer of elegance, however, something dark had taken root, something most people overlooked, but that David King, the CEO of the boutique chain, could no longer ignore. David had built the business from the ground up, transforming a single store into a nationally recognized brand synonymous with opulence and customer care. As a black man in an industry dominated by older white executives, he prided himself on fostering a culture of inclusivity and fairness. It was a principle he championed not only in his hiring practices, but also in the company's broader ethos. Yet, for all his efforts, whispers of a troubling pattern had reached his ears. Accounts of black customers being treated with suspicion, receiving less attention from staff, or even being subtly pushed out of stores. Most of these complaints came from the flagship boutique in Crestview. At first, David dismissed the reports as isolated incidents, assuming his team would handle the issues internally. But the murmurs persisted, growing louder and more frequent. Anonymous emails described hurtful interactions. Reviews online hinted at patterns of discriminatory behavior. David began to see the problem for what it was, not a series of isolated incidents, but a systemic issue festering within his company. It was a betrayal of everything he believed in and everything he had worked to create. Determined to get to the bottom of it, David devised a bold plan. Knowing that his employees would never act improperly in his presence, he decided to disguise himself and observe them without the filter of his authority. With the help of an expert makeup artist and stylist, he spent hours undergoing a complete transformation. His smooth complexion was darkened, his carefully groomed beard replaced with a scruffy shadow, and his tailored suits swapped for worn-out jeans and a weathered jacket. His polished shoes were replaced with scuffed sneakers, and a baseball cap shadowed his face. Standing in front of the mirror, David barely recognized himself. He tugged at the ill-fitting clothes and adjusted the wig, shaking off the discomfort. This was necessary. He wasn't just stepping into another role. He was stepping into the shoes of the very customers his employees were mistreating. He left his usual car behind, taking public transit to complete the transformation. By the time he arrived at the Crestview store, he was unrecognizable, even to himself. The store was bustling with its usual mix of affluent clientele and ambitious young employees. David slipped inside unnoticed, the quiet ding of the glass door blending into the soft symphony of activity. He strolled through the aisles, taking in every detail, the muted chatter of staff, the meticulously arranged displays, the faint scent of cedarwood lingering in the air. He picked up a sleek leather jacket from a rack, running his fingers over the buttery material. A young employee, Luke, glanced his way but quickly turned back to a well-dressed couple browsing handbags. David approached Luke with a polite smile. "Excuse me," he began, holding up the jacket. "Do you have this in a larger size?" Luke's expression hardened. His eyes flicked to David's clothes, his scuffed sneakers, his dark skin. He sighed loudly, his shoulders slumping, as though the question were an enormous burden. "I doubt that's in your price range," he said flatly, not bothering to check. "Maybe try something more affordable." Without waiting for a response, he turned away. The words hit David like a punch. He stood frozen, the jacket still in his hands, as Luke walked away to greet another customer with a warm smile and enthusiastic assistance. Forcing himself to remain calm, David continued browsing. As he moved through the store, the pattern repeated. Sarah, another employee, avoided eye contact, walking briskly past him whenever he approached. When he finally caught her attention to ask about a shirt, her tone was clipped, her responses perfunctory. At the checkout counter, the cashier, Mia, barely looked at him. She rang up his purchase with an expression of distaste, handling his money as though it were contaminated. David felt the weight of their judgments pressing down on him with every passing moment. By the time he left the store, he wasn't just disappointed. He was furious. That night, David sat in his office, replaying the interactions in his mind. He felt a deep sense of betrayal, not just as a CEO, but as a black man who had worked tirelessly to create opportunities for others. The next morning, he arrived at the store in his usual sharp suit, his presence commanding immediate respect. The employees straightened up, their professional masks firmly in place. Without preamble, David called an all-staff meeting. The team gathered in the back, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. David stood at the front, his expression calm but resolute. "I need to address something serious," he began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "Yesterday, I visited this store, not as your CEO, but as a regular customer." Confused murmurs rippled through the group. Luke frowned, shifting uncomfortably. Sarah avoided his gaze. Mia's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them in front of her. "I disguised myself," David continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "I wanted to see how customers are truly treated here. What I experienced was disturbing." He recounted the events of the previous day in painstaking detail, the dismissive glances, the condescending tones, the outright rudeness. As he spoke, the employees' faces grew pale. No one dared to interrupt. "This behavior is unacceptable," David said, his voice rising slightly. "It's not just wrong, it's against everything this company stands for. Starting tomorrow, things will change." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle before delivering the final blow. "Each of you will undergo the same transformation I did. You'll see firsthand what it feels like to be treated the way you've been treating others." The room erupted in stunned silence. No one protested, though the looks on their faces said it all. Fear, guilt, and perhaps a flicker of understanding. The following day, Luke, Sarah, Mia, and the rest of the staff arrived for their makeovers. Their transformations were just as dramatic as David's had been. Luke's trademark charm was replaced with nervous apprehension as he stared at his reflection in the mirror. Sarah, usually poised and confident, fidgeted uncomfortably in her disguise. Even Mia, who rarely ventured beyond her station at the register, seemed overwhelmed. David accompanied them as they visited various establishments around Crestview, stores, restaurants, and even a few coffee shops. The employees experienced exactly what their customers had described. Luke was followed by security while browsing in a department store. Sarah was ignored at a cafe, waiting nearly 20 minutes for service, while others who arrived after her were promptly attended to. Mia was accused of loitering at a convenience store and asked to leave. By the end of the day, the employees were visibly shaken. Back at the boutique, David gathered them once more. "Now you know," he said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. "Now you've felt it. The humiliation, the anger, the pain. This is what you've been putting people through." Luke, who had always been confident and carefree, looked down at his hands, his expression somber. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't realize. I didn't understand." "It's not enough to be sorry," David replied firmly. "You need to change. All of you do. And I'm going to help you." In the weeks that followed, the boutique underwent a complete transformation. David implemented rigorous training programs focused on empathy, cultural awareness, and customer service. Role-playing exercises became a regular part of their meetings, helping employees understand the perspectives of those they served. But David didn't stop there. He partnered with local organizations to address discrimination on a broader scale, encouraging his employees to volunteer and engage with the community. Slowly but surely, the culture began to shift. Luke became one of the most vocal advocates for change, leading discussions and mentoring new hires. Sarah began organizing workshops on diversity and inclusion, sharing her experiences to inspire others. Mia, deeply moved by what she had learned, started volunteering at a community center, helping underprivileged youth navigate challenges of their own. Word of the boutique's transformation spread, drawing attention from other businesses in Crestview and beyond. David received calls from owners seeking advice, some even asking to undergo the same undercover experience. He welcomed their interest, organizing workshops and training sessions that extended far beyond his own company. Years later, David reflected on the journey. The fight against racism wasn't over, it was a lifelong commitment, but his team had proven that change was possible, one step at a time. And sometimes that was all it took to change the world.